Welcome back to session 2. In this session, we're going to be looking at recruiting for management positions. The objectives of this session are to understand behavioral interviewing techniques, and we will also be looking at what we call a STAR tool. This is a tool for behavioral interviewing. But before we go deeply into the tool and the technique, when we talk about management positions, what do we mean? Management positions are the company's lifeline. As a business owner, they are your strategic partners because the people occupying those positions, they're going to advise on development of plans for attracting, utilizing, and retaining quality employees. Their work performance, the way they work, also directly affects the performance indicators of the company. So for instance, your sales manager will be one of your management position holders. And if his work performance is below target, definitely that will affect your performance indicator. The management style of these positions also matter because it affects the staff's work attitudes. And again, they represent the company's corporate culture. And when it comes to the price, their pay should be significantly higher than that offered to ordinary employees. So as we go along during this session, do bear in mind that holders of your management positions, they are your strategic partners and are your company's lifeline. So let's look at those who we mean are your strategic partners. Who are they? On this slide, you can see that we refer to those who occupy the management position and functional managers. As an SME, you may not have maybe director of finance, sales director. You may not give them those titles. However, you're most likely to have a sales manager, an accounts officer. They are your key staff. And what are their roles? They're going to advise on developing and implementing short and long-term objectives. Because as your strategic partner, you as the company owner, you would have shared with them what your objectives are. They will also monitor the implementation of these objectives, and they are the ones responsible for managing the company's human, financial, and physical resources. Let's look at your perspective when it comes to recruiting. Your perspective on recruitment is central to successful recruiting. From the slide we are looking at now, we can see all the different points of view that you may have in recruitment. Your perspective as the company owner is the compass that directs the recruitment policy of the company. So, the company owner is known as the recruitment compass. That is the one who gives the direction. For instance, looking at the slide, the company owner should let HR know if he or she is willing to offer a key position to a recent graduate or the number of years experience that you would like. Another thing to indicate might be a preferred age range or the level of qualification. So all these factors, all these points of view are things that the company owner should share with HR so that these factors and these points of view will be taken on board by HR when it comes to recruiting. Let's see how having a clear and consistent recruitment policy can help your business. A clear recruitment direction from the owner will allow all staff members to guide their activities in accordance with the owner's expectations. So, when we look at the slide we have now, we can see that once the direction for the recruitment policy is there, this will help your departments to be well coordinated, which will in turn lead to a mutual understanding between the staff and the management, and ultimately it will promote your company's image. If the company's image is being clearly and consistently portrayed to candidates during the recruitment process, this will influence the candidate's loyalty and commitment to the company on the long run. So when you are carrying out interviews, what should you do? I'm sure most of you know what you shouldn't do, but let's look at some critical things that you need to do. Firstly, during your interview, you are attracting the candidates. So you need to inspire confidence in the candidates, respond clearly to all their questions, and convey goodwill about your company. because ultimately you want to attract the candidate to the job. Secondly, and very important, please take notes. Take notes on the main points during the interview. If a candidate gives an answer to you, confirm the answer, seek clarity if you are not sure before you go on to the next question. During the interview, be sure to observe the candidate. Take note of their attitude, their behavior, appearance, their posture, their manner of explaining things, of having a discussion. And also, last but not the least, and very important, please listen. We say you spend 75% of the interview listening to the candidates. Be an active listener. Don't interrupt the candidate. Don't finish their sentences for them or assume you know what they want to say and end the conversation. Don't give unnecessary comments. And please do not rush to conclusions. Don't argue with the candidates. And again, always ask for clarification when needed. When you have put all these things into practice, you can then think about using the behavioral technique during the interview process. So what is a behavioral interview? I'm sure you all know there are different types of interviewing methods and techniques, and you've probably heard some: panel interviews, stress interviews, one-to-ones, group interviews. A company can use a combination of any of these methods to suit their individual needs and conditions. But the behavioral interviewing technique is one that is used to evaluate a potential employee based on their past experience to understand the way they can react in various job-related situations in order to determine whether he or she is going to be suitable for the position. So what we're saying is that this technique is based on the belief that behaviors reflected by candidates in the past is the best predictor of their future performance. Let's look at the stages of this behavioral interview. So, the first stage is the information provided by the candidate, and that is from their CV, all the information you need. They will have given it to you on their CV or on the application form they completed for you. The second stage is where the interviewer uses the information provided by the candidate to make predictions of their future work performance. And then the last stage is the decision-making stage by the company. So let's look at this technique in detail. The technique is called STAR. And what is STAR tool? What is it? The STAR tool uses situations and tasks to identify and assess the actions taken and the results achieved. So looking at the slide, you can see STAR is spelled out there, but the S stands for situations, the T for tasks, the A for actions, and the R for results. Now, the advantages of using this technique as opposed to all the other interviewing techniques is that, one, it provides information on real people, real events, and so it minimizes your decision making being subjective. It saves time and limits costs. It requires only reasonable interviewing skills, and it does not require any expert analysis. It is suitable for every type of business. So as a small business owner, whatever industry, whatever sector, if you follow this technique, you can't go wrong. Also, it is compatible with our Nigerian culture. And lastly, if you need to persuade members of your team or interview panel when making a recruitment decision, you can do so easily because this tool is objective. It helps your decision making to be objective and not subjective. Let's look at a quick example. On this slide, you can see that we have 3 different sections. The first one is where the interviewer would ask the candidate, for instance, tell us what you did when you noticed that a salesman tried to fabricate sales volume. What was the result of your actions? From this question, you can see that a case has been established. The interviewer is asking for the action that the candidate took and what the result was. The interviewee, the candidate, might respond like this: I compared sales volume and purchase orders during the month in question. I then went on to check the stock at our distributors and agents where I uncovered the evidence of fabrication. I spoke to the management and the salesman in question was dismissed. The result of my action was that it reinforced disciplinary policies within the company, and it restored our customers' trust in the company. The interviewer now, looking at the response of the candidate, can specifically see what the candidate did and what the result was. So we'll use this to predict the kind of experience that the candidate has, the behavior, problem-solving skills, and most importantly, see whether this candidate is suitable for our company. Again, another sample question might be, tell us the most difficult customer complaint you ever processed. Using the STAR technique, the action will then be, what did you do to persuade the customer to agree with your solution? So if you ask that question, tell us the most difficult customer complaint you ever processed. That is the situation or the task. You ask that question, the candidate responds, but you want to dig deep to establish the action that the candidate actually took. You then go on to further ask, what did you do to persuade this customer to agree with your solution? And then for you to know the results of that action, you will then say, and what were the results? Or what aspects of the results were you pleased with? Or what aspects were you not pleased with? Tell us why. You can see that from this line of questioning, a candidate will be able to demonstrate and tell you exactly what their past performance has been like. And you, as the interviewer, will be able to take notes and establish the correct type of performance, whether the performance is suitable or not suitable. Now, there are 3 steps to pick a star. Remember, the STAR tool is to help you pick a star candidate. What are these 3 steps? The first one is that as the company, before you start your interviewing, you should have developed a recruitment criteria. Secondly, you have your interviewing principles established. And then thirdly, you will collect data and classify your stars. Let's look at these steps in detail. The first step, where we say you develop your recruitment criteria. Now, in developing your criteria, incorporate what we call the ask model to determine the competency level of your candidates. What do we mean by ask model? Ask simply stands for attitude, skill, and knowledge. Now, all these 3 elements must go hand in hand to help you determine the competency level of your candidate. Because each one separately, for instance, attitude, is not an indicator of a good fit within the company. Skill is only proficiency in a particular task. And knowledge is not the decisive factor for success. Each job within your company will require a different set of attitudes, skills, and knowledge. And it is these attitudes and skills that defines the employee or candidate's ideal behavior. So, under the ask model, there are 3 components that form competency: the attitude, the skill, and the knowledge. How do you determine your competency levels? Let's look at that on the next slide. Now, your competency levels helps you to ascertain the level of proficiency in a particular criteria. So that is a ranking from perhaps novice to expert level in that particular criteria. The number of levels you have in each competency dimension depends on the company, and the table you are seeing on the screen now is just provided as an example. So let's quickly look at the table. You can see that at the top of the table you have basic, which is ranked as 1, intermediate 2, proficient level is 3, advanced level is 4. On the left hand column straight down, we have listed knowledge, skill, and attitude. So for instance, if we want to look at somebody who we will score a 3 in knowledge. That means that that candidate has an in-depth understanding of the job. Someone with a 2 in skill means that this person is able to work without supervision. So again, the number of levels in each competency dimension depends on the company, and you will determine these competency levels according to the position that you are advertising, the position in the company. Let's look at an example of a competency analysis. For the sales supervisor, the criteria we're looking at is 1, approach customers and introduce products. The second one is to be able to persuade and consult with customers. And lastly, to monitor the results. The competency criteria under knowledge for all 3 is that the sales supervisor must be knowledgeable about customers, the market, and products. When it comes to skill, the supervisor should be able to guide and plan when it comes to approaching customers and introducing the products. And when it comes to the sales supervisor's attitude, what you want him to have is open and active attitude. So you can see from this slide that as a company, as a business owner, you will sit down and look at the competency levels and the criteria that you require for each position. When you have done this, let us now look at what your interviewing principles might be. So for the star, firstly, you have to use open-ended questions. And up there we have said H and 5 W's. I will explain that. You have to focus on the job. And by focusing on the job, we mean recent, important, and job-related issues. So when a candidate comes to you, focus on what they've done in the recent past. Don't focus on jobs they did 15 years ago. You also should focus on the candidate's strength and weaknesses. Find out the potential development of the candidate. Lead the candidate through the challenges of the new job. So for instance, if the job requires the candidate to work night shift 1 weekend per month, you make sure you let them know. If the job requires that they travel once a month, twice a month, make sure you let them know. And finally, a principle that is very important is that you do not explore personal issues. So let me go back to the first one, using open-ended questions. An open-ended question is designed to encourage a full, meaningful answer using the subject's own knowledge and/or feelings. An open-ended question is the opposite of a closed-ended question. A closed-ended question will only encourage a short or a single-word answer. When you are interviewing, you do not want short or single-word answers. You want your candidates to be able to give you meaningful answers that will display their knowledge. And using the H and 5 W's means H stands for how. So you ask a question. You start your question with how. How did you do this? W stands for where, what, when, why, and which. So those are your 5 W's. Where, what, when, why, and which. Once you start your questions with those open-ended words, it will elicit more response from your candidates and they'll be able to go into depth regarding the answers you want. And then when it comes to maybe leading candidates through the challenges of the new job, you might ask questions like, you used to be a sales manager. What did you do when sales reports were late? What were the results of your actions? Once you understand these principles, you then prepare your questions accordingly. The last step is to collect data on the various candidates and then to classify them. Why do we need to classify this data? Looking at the slide we have up here, you can see we have 3 different stars. We have the right star, the wrong star, and the insufficient star. What do we mean by the right star? The right star refers to the candidate who provides answers from actual cases. They will describe specific actions they took, and they will also describe clear results. In short, this candidate will demonstrate an ability that shows that they know what they're talking about. When we say a candidate is a wrong star, what do we mean? It means that the candidate doesn't know how to answer the question, or the answers were not specific, very vague, or the answers were very theoretical, something they just read up. The third category is a candidate that we will give an insufficient star. That means that this candidate did not display a depth of knowledge, lacked knowledge, they lacked experience, and they lacked any results that they could talk about. When we come to classify the stars, what this helps you with as an interviewer is that, one, it helps you to evaluate the candidate's experience and see how candidates reacted in past situations. Secondly, it helps you to identify whether a candidate's answers are sufficient or they need to be explored further. Lastly, it will help you to easily make a final decision when, for instance, for the same star question, different candidates give different answers. So how do we then assess and make a decision? After collecting the data and classifying the stars, the first thing you need to do is to analyze the data you have. You then evaluate and compare the data and ultimately make a decision. Step 1, data analysis. On this slide, you can see that we have a chart that shows 4 different levels of standard competency. The first level is what we call not acceptable. That means that this candidate, the responses, their performance was below our standard level. The second level is what we have called temporarily acceptable. That means that this candidate nearly reaches our standard level but not quite. The third level is the acceptable level, which means that this candidate reaches the standard level. Level 4 means that this candidate is more than acceptable. That means that they surpass the standard level. This is the basis for knowing whether candidates reach the competency levels required by the job using the star levels. As a company owner, you will set your own levels. Once you set your levels, during the interviewing process, you are ranking your candidates, so that once you finish your ranking and classification, this is the kind of analysis you will then need to do. Step 2, we then go on to evaluate and compare results. To evaluate and compare results, the first thing we do is we take the weight, which is the score of the candidate, we multiply it by the rank of the star to get the points for each dimension. Next, we take the total points of all the dimensions by the total weight, and this will give us the candidate's average points. And then lastly, we then rank the candidates by average points to get the list of successful candidates. Now let's go on to see how we make our decision. Step 3, making decisions. We use the candidate scores. That is the competency levels, the scoring you gave them for their competencies, and also the interviewing scores using the STAR tool. You then select your candidates based on those who have the must-have criteria that you have determined, and then should-have criteria. However, when you have a tie, what do? You then consider other factors, and some of the factors to consider might include: will this candidate fit my company's culture? Will this candidate grow professionally within the company? You look at their commitment level. You look at what unique skills they have. Maybe they possess some unique skills that could be beneficial to their own success, to their performance within the company. So for instance, when you are looking at, will the candidate fit your company culture? If your company has a lot of independent-minded individuals, for instance, if the candidate you've seen seems to be more team-oriented and a collaborative type of candidate, then you can easily see that there could be a mismatch there. If you look at that, if you use that factor, for instance, and you notice that kind of mismatch, then you will know that this candidate may not fit properly within your company. Another one is when you look at the commitment level of the candidate. You want to gauge whether the candidate is going to be a job hopper. That is somebody who will jump from one job to the other, from one company to the other every 2 years. Or you want somebody who is going to be there for the long haul, who is going to be committed to your company. In that case, you take a look at their career goals. Do these goals mesh with the position they've applied for? What is their aim? Where are they going? Or is the job they're coming for, that you are interviewing them for? Are they just doing it for the money? Or is it a serious, focused career move? These are all the things that you need to pay attention to when it comes to making a decision where you have a tie between two good candidates. Of course, when you have found your candidate and you want to negotiate with them, salary is not the only factor that you can negotiate. So you have to be willing to negotiate on other factors, such as benefits, opportunities for promotion and development within your company, opportunities for the candidates to be trained and to apply that learning to their job. You let them know how enjoyable and interesting the work is, the kind of working environment it is, if it's a friendly, family-oriented working environment. I know that as SMEs, we can be very conscious of costs when it comes to benefits, but there are lots of inexpensive benefits that an SME owner can adapt or adopt or include as part of their benefits package. Inexpensive benefits such as maybe airtime recharges or even digital TV subscriptions, perhaps membership subscriptions to professional bodies. These kind of benefits will not cost an arm and a leg, as we say. So be willing to negotiate once you've identified your candidate. If you want to negotiate successfully, you need to be able to identify the needs of the candidate. What is driving the candidate? So, identifying what the candidate wants, what do they most want, what are they really interested in, or what motivates them to work. Some candidates, for instance, pay attention to working conditions. Sometimes it can be the actual work that they have to complete or deliver, or it can be the work relationship, work coordination, the leadership style of the owner, the company culture. And then you might have candidates who are interested in flexible ways of working, such as maybe working part-time or on contract. So once you identify what is most important, the most important needs to the candidate, this will help you negotiate. I hope this session has been useful to you when it comes to recruiting for your management positions. You're now going to take a pause to do an end of session activity before we go on to the next session.